This is the Chapter 3 demonstration problem on the cash budget. Let's start on page 75 with Exhibit 3-1. Let's start by entering in some of the basic information for this cash budget and doing a little bit of formatting along with it. Go ahead and start with the heading for the cash budget. Once you have the heading entered, let's go ahead and center the heading through column I. Go ahead and highlight A through I, right click on Format Cells, click on Alignment and the Center Across Selection and click OK. Once you have this, go ahead, click your Format Painter and highlight the next two lines and it will do the same for you, centering across the selection. Let's go ahead and add a thick border here, as well as it looks like we're going to have a thick border for the months. In column C, let's go ahead and type in April, and then in column D, May. And then let's go ahead and copy those across. Once again, Excel is very good at formatting, so recognizing patterns. And so if you just enter two data points, if it can recognize it, it'll try to pick that up and you'll be able to use it to calculate across or copy across. Let's go ahead and add a little bit of shading. And let's go ahead and center our months as well. Next, let's go ahead, starting with row number 5, going through row number 15 and entering in the information that we need for the problem. Once you have your information typed in, let's go ahead and auto size column A, double click between column A and B to get the auto size. Now, once again, using the control key, let's go ahead and highlight cash, first month, second month, and it looks like we're going to need to indent first month and second month again, and go ahead and click on the increase indent. Let's do that 2 times. Looks like the total collections row should be bolded, as well as the total payments row should be bolded as well. In addition to that, if I use the control key again, click on collections and the payments and italicize the print. Looks like we're ready to go. Now with the cash column, let's enter in 0.4 or 40%, 0.45, 0.15, 0.50, 0.60, and 0.4. Okay, let's go ahead and use the percent format on those numbers. Looks like we're good. Let's go ahead next and enter in the sales from April through October. Once you have the sales entered, let's go ahead and kind of highlight the whole thing here and use some comma formatting with no decimal points. Let's just go ahead and talk just a moment about the sales. Here it looks like we have a barbecue manufacturer, and the sales kind of gear up at the beginning of the summer, and they kind of falter or trail off towards the end of the year. Seasonal sales like this is fairly typical for lots of manufacturers or for many businesses. So that's just one of the examples or one of the points to notice when looking at the cash budget for this particular company. Next, let's go ahead and do our calculations for the cash collections. The assumption that our authors are using here is that 40% of the sales that are made in cash. So let's say equals 40%, and let's use our referencing. So click on the F4 key, multiplied by the sales for the month. Okay, so a total amount of $154,800 of the sales made in June are expected to be collected in June. it looks like 45% of the sales are expected to be collected in the month following the sale. So let's say equals, click on 45%, once again using our referencing, multiplied by the sales in May. And hit return, and then 15% of the sales are expected to be collected 2 months following the sales. So let's say equals the 15%, click F4, times 2 months following, or the April sales, and hit return. So our total collections, if we click on the Auto Sum button up here in the upper right hand corner, Auto Sum, it's grabbing the right information, it's bolding it, looks good. Okay, it looks like our authors would like us to use a double bottom border with a top, which is pretty typical. And let's go ahead and copy that over through the month of September. Now, if we double check our totals, we can tell if we have issues so far. Looks like I have an issue, 154, 162. It looks like I have an issue here. Oh, and there I made a typo. It should not be 291. Instead, or 391. It should be 291. Okay. See if I have other issues. Double checking my numbers as I go. Looks like I'm good. So the next item to put into our cash budget is for the purchases. It looks like the purchases are going to be equal to 50% of the next month's sales. So let's do it. Equals 50% using our F4 button or our referencing multiplied by the sales for the next month. That is the inventory that we're going to need to manufacture and create the sales for the following month. So we can go ahead and copy that across as well. Double checking our totals as we go, we should be good. The next item on our cash budget is the payment of the purchases of our inventory. It looks like we're going to pay 60% of our purchases in the first month following the purchase. So let's say equals, click on the 60%, once again using our referencing or the F4 key, multiplied by the purchases for May, and hit return. So our payments are going to be $116,100, which is 60% of the May purchases. The next 40% is going payment for the purchases is going to be equal to the 40% using our F4 key multiplied by the purchases from April, and hit return. So that should be $73,000. And then we need our total payments using our auto sum function. And let's go ahead and just quickly grab the format painter to copy down the formatting from above. And now we can copy this across for June through September. Exhibit 3-2 on page 76 provides a pretty good diagram for referencing the collections and the payments. Next, let's continue on with Exhibit 3-3 on page 77, picking up with row number 17. Go ahead and type in row 17 through 26. Once you have this information typed in, go ahead and auto size column A. And let's go ahead and indent rows number 19 through 25. And let's go ahead and do that twice, just like we did above. In addition, it looks like our authors want us to italicize the print for less disbursements. And we also want to bold the total disbursements. Now our collections are going to be equal to, so just type in equals and click on the total collections from above. And so our collections are equal to our collections. nothing exciting there. Next we have our inventory payments. Our inventory payments are going to be equal to exactly that, our inventory payments from above. Click there and go ahead and copy that across through September. Looks like our authors have calculated wages at 20%. Looks like 20% of sales. So let's say equals 20%, once again using our referencing, multiplied by the sales for the month. So we have 77,400. Go ahead and copy that. Looks like the company has a monthly lease payment of 10,000. Quick way to do that entry, if you highlight the 4 columns and type in 10,000, and now if you hit Control Enter, it automatically enters it in across the selection. Now our interest, we will come back and calculate the interest later. Looks like the company paid maybe a semi-annual dividend of 50,000, and then is going to have 0 for the remaining period. Looks like the company pays quarterly taxes, 25,000. 0 tab 25,000. So businesses have to contribute taxes normally on a quarterly basis. So the $25,000 is their way of paying their income taxes as they go. You and I, when we get a paycheck, our employers take money out of our paychecks on our behalf and pay that into the Internal Revenue Service. Employers don't have somebody to take the money out for them, so they have to pay their share in on a quarterly basis. It's considered to be a pay-as-you-go type of plan. Now it looks like the company is planning a large purchase of 200,000 in the month of July. Okay, so total disbursements there. Let's just go ahead and once again using the auto sum function, and we need to redefine, so just click on or highlight the area that you want it to include and hit return. Let's go ahead and use our format painter from above, just grabbing those formats, and now we can copy that across and we have our total disbursements calculated. Now continuing on with Exhibit 3-4 on page 79, let's go ahead and type in the information from rows 27 through 33. Okay, once you have this information in, go ahead, once again, auto size column number A. And it looks like everything here should be left justified. So let's go ahead and take off the indentations there. And I'm just going to use a quick format painter from any number above and paste that into the minimum acceptable cash. In addition to that, on row number 31, it looks like our authors want us to bold that and double underline that entire row. Oh, I'm grabbing the wrong row, excuse me. And once again using the double underline. Once again, let's also show any computations that we're going to need with an underline as indicated. Let's do the same with the current borrowing. Okay, it looks like the authors are going to start us out with an ending cash balance for the month of May of 20,000. And once again, it kind of looks like we better do some more comma formatting. So go ahead, grab the comma formatting, reduce it down 2 decimal points. Now, the idea here is that if the ending cash balance of May is 20,000, naturally the beginning cash balance for the month of June would be equal to the ending cash balance for May. Stands to reason. Now, the cash collections minus disbursements is going to be equal to total collections. You could grab it from up here or down here. Either one is fine. Total collections minus total disbursements. Okay. Okay, looks like I have an issue. I need to go back up to row number 22 and enter in interest. It looks like the company might have some type of periodic interest payment, quarterly interest payment of $30,000. So if I go back to 3-4, it looks like my collections minus disbursements is working. Next then, our unadjusted cash balance is going to be equal to our beginning cash balance plus the collections minus disbursements. So our unadjusted cash balance is $1,200. Since the company has a minimum acceptable cash balance of $15,000, we have a little bit of a problem. So we have a problem. Now then, let's use our first if statement for the course. Let's go up to the function button here and click on the FX button. And go ahead and type in IF, or for the if statement, and hit return 2 times. Then comes up the function arguments button. Here's the logic that we're going to use. We're going to say that if, and go ahead and click on the 1,200. If the 1,200 is less than, that's the shift comma button, is less than the minimum acceptable cash, let's go ahead and use some referencing. But if the 1,200 is less than 1,500, which is showing it is true, we have a problem. We need to do something. What we need to do is to borrow some money. And how much are we going to borrow? We are going to borrow an amount that's equal to the 15,000. Click on the 15,000 using your F4 button once again, minus the $1,200. Okay? If it is false, we're not going to borrow anything, so type in a 0. So you can see that the result of our situation is that we are going to borrow $13,800. So therefore, our ending cash balance, go figure, is going to be equals the 13,800 plus the 1,200. And there we have it. Now, let's test this. Go ahead, highlight the formulas that we just calculated and copy across. Picking up on page 81 of our textbook, there's a section here that refers to repaying short-term borrowing, which certainly stands to reason and makes sense, because at some point if you borrow money here to maintain this minimum acceptable cash balance, once you have extra money, certainly it stands to reason that you're going to pay back that short-term borrowing. And our authors take us through a formula on page 81. It's the second to the last paragraph, where if you were to take this if statement and type in the minimum portion, or excuse me, if you go back up to the FX button, and if you type in the min function and follow through with that formula, it will produce the current borrowing as a negative when the company has extra money. However, I think I'm going to go ahead and bypass that formula, because like any spreadsheet, sometimes we have ways to work around a higher level of logic or a more complex scenario. And so we're going to go ahead and bypass that at this time. So let's go ahead and click OK to eliminate the function arguments or accept it. In bypassing that logic, let's go ahead on row number 32 and insert a column. And let's go ahead and type in, and I'm going off of Exhibit 3-5 now on page 82. Let's go ahead on row 32 and type in cumulative borrowing. Okay, and the cumulative borrowing is basically going to be equal to equals the borrowing. And so our first month, that's okay. But in the second month, we're going to say equals to the current borrowing, or excuse me, the previous month's borrowing plus the current borrowing. So cumulatively, I have a problem, equals the previous month's borrowing, I think I did a multiplication, plus the current borrowing. Hit return. There we have it. And now I need to resize my column F and maybe stretch that out just a little bit. Now I can copy that formula across. Now I'm going to skip pages up through page 89, and let's reference Exhibit 3-7. Underneath the cumulative borrowing, let's actually start back up on row number 23. Go ahead and insert, so select row 23, right-click, click Insert, and let's go ahead and type in short-term interest. Expense, income, and hit return. And I'm just going to go ahead and put a little bit of shading in here just as a reminder that we need to come back and we have more work to do up here. Now if we click on row number 32, let's right click and click Insert. Here if we had current borrowing, if we're going to do some paying back, we're going to have a current investing, and hit return. Now it looks like our formatting here we're going to need down here, so I just grabbed the format painter real quick, and now I want to get rid of the bordering there. And then towards the bottom on row 37 we had above that minimum acceptable cash. So let's also create a maximum acceptable cash. And let's go ahead and type in a borrowing rate and a lending rate. Our maximum acceptable cash is going to be $40,000. And let's do a quick format painter. Get our formatting right. Looks like we want the comma formatting. So our annual rate is going to be 8% and our lending rate is going to be 6%. So the monthly rate is going to be equal to the 8% divided by 12. And let's use of course, the percent with 2 decimal points, 0.67. Let's go ahead and copy that down. Now let's go ahead and do a little more formulation. So here's our logic here. If we don't have enough money, or if we don't have enough cash, we're going to borrow. If we have more than our monthly acceptable cash, then we're going to turn around and invest that money. So let's go ahead and enter in the formula for our current investing. Let's go ahead and click on the FX button and choose the if function. And our logic is that if our unadjusted balance, click on the unadjusted balance, is greater than the maximum acceptable cash, of which it is, and let's use once again our referencing. If that is true, and it tells us that that is, the amount that we're going to borrow is going to be equal to the unadjusted balance minus the maximum acceptable cash, once again using your F4 button. And if it's false, we're not going to invest any, so let's plug it in. And so you can see right here that the result is going to be that we're going to invest $81,500. Now we need to update our cumulative borrowing. Let's go ahead and subtract the current investing down here in the cumulative borrowing formula. And let's go ahead and copy that across. And let's go ahead and copy our new formula across as well. Let's also go ahead and update our ending cash balance formula, because if we double click on that formula, you can see that it's taking the unadjusted cash balance plus the amount of borrowing, but we also want to subtract the investing. And let's go ahead and copy that across. Now let's go ahead up here into our short-term interest and calculate the interest on our borrowing or our investing. So our formula for our short-term interest, let's go ahead and click on the short-term interest, then click on the FX button and choose the if statement once again. Our logic is going to be that if our cumulative borrowing in the previous month, because interest is paid for in arrears, is going to be the $13,800, if that is greater than 0, and in this case you can see that that is true, the amount that we're going to borrow, the amount of the interest is going to be equal to the amount that we borrowed in the previous month multiplied by the borrowing rate. And go ahead and use your referencing with the F4 key. However, if that happens to be false, in which over here you can see that in this case it ends up being an investing. We're doing cumulative investing. And so in that case, if that happens to be false, we're investing, so we're going to do the lending rate. So click on the cumulative borrowing multiplied by the monthly lending rate. And once again, use your referencing there too. And click OK. Then go ahead and copy the formula across. And we have the amount of our short-term interest. Finally, I'm going to go ahead and take off the background color here for the short-term interest. That concludes the chapter demonstration problem. There is one more chapter demonstration problem regarding the scenario manager, and that problem will pick up where we leave off here. We'll see you in the next video.